What's good, mi gente? Welcome back. It's your boy Raul. Thanks for joining me here on How Do You Say Success in Spanglish. Today, I have a very special guest, Edwin Berroa. How you doing, Edwin?
Bro, what's good, brother? What's up?
Chilling, man. How's it going, man? It's been a while. I'm glad.
I know it's been far too long, man. Far too
It,
long.
yeah, it really has. I know him for quite some time since I was a young little kid.
Yeah, man.
So
What has it been like 20 years at
it's
least?
been like 20 years now, bro. It's crazy, right? It's been like 20,
Yeah.
21 years. So,
You actually knew me when I had hair.
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. But just to kind of give everybody a little intro on Edwin, Edwin Berroa is an assistant principal inside the New York City public school system, has been in education for over a decade. Edwin has a pulse in building capacity and building community to ensure success. Growing up in a Dominican household, he's been around people in his family that have seen struggles and have been resilient in their efforts. He believes in the elevation and social emotional wellness of students, as well as inclusion and equitable access to the next generation of tomorrow's great minds. Edwin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, my brother.
Yeah, man, and I'm really happy that you're here. I know you got you know I have my long list of people, and you've always held the special place in my spot since like early on in when I first started college. When we started college, we went through the fraternity, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
So when you hit me up, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you hit me up, dude. So, but I guess to start off, tell me, who is Edwin Baroa?
Whew, okay. All right. So just like you started, my family is from the Dominican Republic. I guess to start off, come from a family of having five sisters and a brother. I'm the youngest of seven. We're kind of like the Latino Brady Bunch, if you will, because my mom had her previous relationship and had a daughter. My dad had previous relationships that had four daughters, and then when they got together, they had my brother and me. Um, from there, we raised in the Bronx. Just a kind of backstory: my parents they came to the United States in the '60s. My mom first started in Puerto Rico. My grandmother working in an umbrella factory took all her kids over to Puerto Rico just to get a better life because DR just wasn't it. And
Mm-hmm.
then one thing led to another. They came to New York. My dad was always a family friend, so they got to know each other. They found a relationship, and then that kind of just springed off. My dad worked all of his life as what they call a platform worker, which is a person that works the back of the actual 16 trailer trucks just
Mm,
to put all the merchandise in it. And then my mom was a daycare teacher up until her retirement.
nice,
Yeah.
awesome. And so what was? I don't want to make you sound old. But what
No,
was
no.
life for living in the Bronx when you were growing up? Because that was a completely
Oh,
different time than the way
yeah.
things are now.
Yeah, man. I mean, like growing up in the '80s. I mean, it was during the crack epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
So like I still remember being on the first floor because we were raised in the projects. So John Adams' houses was my projects, and my mom still lives there. But I still remember living on the first floor and looking outside my window, and all you see is crack vials. You know, it was just like they said, man. It was a dangerous thing around. One of the you had to be mindful in reference to making relationships and building relationships and walking a particular way and not being out at a certain time. So my parents really took that to heart and made sure that we were safe. um, I will say that part of the living in that part of town was also making sure that you know cops didn't see you as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that environment, like they didn't know what they were working with. You're in a housing development where there's four buildings around you, each one is 20 floors up. So you don't know who's who.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely do remember my encounters of getting patted down for no particular reason, just because they were just being precautious. But I was never one of those kids to get into trouble, so I was okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it is a struggle. I mean, people see videos and movies now of New York. It's very glamorized and very like amazing and beautiful. And then you watch movies from the '80s. New York was a different image, even on screen. Where
Oh, absolutely.
I remember coming to visit family in Queens in the '90s and things like that. And it was, it was a scarier version of New York. But you also had you being kind of living dual roles in the Latino and the Afro, being Afro Latino.
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
it hits all over the place, right?
Yeah, that one, like, that's actually a good point. Like, yeah, I tend to dabble in that world. You know what I'm saying? Like, because, being in a Dominican household, of course, my first language is Spanish, but also living in this particular area, everyone thought I was African American, so I love the fact that I could dabble between both worlds because, it it made me who I was. I'm able to, you know, code switch. Let's speak this way, but let's speak a completely different way. But I also love it because I can catch people off guard.
Yeah.
And that's been a constant thing where people, the first thing they look at me like, "You speak Spanish?" Like, yeah, um,
Yeah.
it's constant. I got it. As a matter of fact, the first when I started working at my new school, no one really knew that I was Dominican until I started talking Spanish.
Hmm.
But then, it just everybody just knows now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hard to miss it when forget you. It's hard to forget you when they meet you. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, we know Edwin. I was like, once you know
Exactly.
him, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. So also in part of your interview, your pre-interview, you talked about there were some obstacles you had to overcome, growing up,
Oh,
speech impediment, weight bullying, and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
absolutely. All right. So growing up, I guess my family growing up always called me El Gago. Always because I had a speech impediment. I used to stutter. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, I'm happy that I never had to do like speech therapy or anything to try to fix it. But I vividly remember fresh out of kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I had the speech impediment where it just took me forever to just say what I had to say. You know, it got so bad where it took me forever to ask the teacher, "Can I use the restroom?" And I wound up, just urinating on myself. You
Oh
know,
no.
yeah, man. But nonetheless, that it became up and down up until junior high school and high school. But then in high school, that's where I guess it started to fade away, only because
Mm-hmm.
I felt more accepted. Like the friends around me didn't really care the fact that I had a speech impediment. They just liked me for me. You know, I don't know what triggered in my adolescent years or how it changed, but one thing is for sure that high school it really slowed down a lot. There are some times where it tends to just flare up because I might be excessively nervous or maybe I don't have the words to say, but you know, it's pretty much gone.
Good, good. And you mentioned you were bullied as well growing up a bit.
Yeah, bullying happened in middle school.
Yeah.
It's one of those where I've never been one to get into any physical altercations. To this day, knock on wood, I've never been in a physical fight.
Nice.
You know, but middle school was that time where I guess I was being tested. It's the testy waters.
Hmm.
So I still remember the actual bullier, or I won't mention his name. But that individual, was bullying me to just try to do his homework. I guess I had a knack for just doing my work or whatever. But one thing led to another, and it was just like, eventually the bullying had to stop because I got fed up. And that was that one day I just stood up. I was like, "No, I'm doing this." Like, so what you gonna do? And at that moment, that's when he stopped. That was I think it was eighth grade, if I'm not mistaken. It was just physically stopped. He just stopped asking for homework, stopped everything. But I felt really proud of myself because I was able to actually overcome that. And I was like, you know what? Whatever happens right now is gonna happen. If we gotta throw down, I'll fake it till I make it. But we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
But he definitely backed off, and that was I think my only incident of being bullied. But it was something that was really annoying, and I think it was a little bit traumatizing because you felt helpless. You felt
Yeah.
like um, people around you saw it, but they just kind of just let it be. Some people didn't intervene, and I wish they did intervene, but thank goodness I was able to handle it.
Yeah. It was different back then when we did stuff because I remember too. I mean, I think very similar growing up. Smart, overweight, quiet. At the time, I was real quiet back then. I'm not quiet now, but I
Really?
was quiet. I was very quiet. I was the quiet kid that was smart, and I was just a big guy. And so yeah, the same thing. You dealt with your level of bullies for whatever reason because they knew you were the quiet kid and picked up. And same thing. I had a situation where a bully picked me up. Mine ended differently. I did end up getting in a fight and breaking his nose. So it was
Okay.
on a different end of the spectrum
Yeah,
of,
man.
of what you dealt with. But it was also a lot of the same thing. Like every day was dealing with the same things. And so
Right.
knowing the stuff that you dealt with like that back in the day as a teacher now, oh, I'm sorry, assistant principal now,
Mhm.
how does that impact some of what you do, like how you look at things in school now?
That's a good question. I actually never really thought about it that way. Um, I think it impacts it in the sense that I'm always I'm always on the lookout. Like I don't want a student to feel like helpless, or that someone is taking advantage of them simply because, of their niceness or because of their humbleness. Like everyone deserves a free shot to be free and to do what they need to do, but everyone needs to put in their own effort. You
Mm-hmm.
know, definitely feel that, the individual, the students, the community needs to be protected. And as an assistant principal, I think my role is to make them feel safe and make them feel comfortable in their own skin, so they don't have to put that facade on. You know,
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, we had a assistant principal meeting a couple of weeks ago, where we were talking about this, because a lot of times you have a lot of the youth that, some of them are straightforward, but some of them tend to hide, and they hide in a particular shell, but they don't show their true self. So imagine just having like an outer layer skin that you can just unzip. So a lot of times the student, tends to show off or just be that comical kid that's not their nature, or maybe they might be defiant or just argumentative, but that's not their nature. But there might be an underlying reason. But I think part of it is building that relationship to make sure that they're seen. You know, and part of my mission, I think, is to make sure that these kids are seen. When you're seen, you're able to perform better. You're able to do better.
Mhm.
But you have to build that connection and relationship with the kid. A lot of the kids, they come from different personalities, different homes, different situations. Got a lot of kids that come from single family homes. Um, and they're dealing with a lot more than I think you and I were dealing with back in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, well, really. It's
Yeah,
something yeah, I mean, we think about how much worse things were, like probably socioeconomically, like in the city, but there's
right.
so much more interactive with kids nowadays when it comes to the internet, and like
Oh,
they can't escape anymore. That it's like, I
no.
have a daughter, she's 10 and she's
Mhm.
about to do middle school. And I know when you talked about middle school being that transition between good kid and punk, I mean, it was like I was a really good kid until middle school, you know what I mean? I was like, I never
Right.
got the attention, I never got anything until middle school. Not that I was a horrible kid, but
Yeah.
it's a big, like you said, testing grounds
Oh,
for
absolutely. Yeah. Listen, middle school, in my eyes, middle school is meant to, it is what I call the testing years. Like you tend to figure out a little bit about who you are. College, high school is kind of what builds you up, but college is what defines you.
Mhm.
So like those are the incremental steps. In that middle school, you're trying to find yourself. You're trying to be socially awkward or inawkward. You're trying to
Mhm.
fit in. High school, you're still trying to fit in, but now adolescence is kicking in. Now you get more rationale in your thinking. You know, and you're building that character. But then in college, that's where like it's like you're chipping off all those imperfections so that way you can become that better person.
Mhm. Yeah, and I agree. Like I said, I remember like I said, I have my daughter. She's gonna start middle school next year. I remember my transition to middle school, and I am scared just to see what's coming next. But I trust her, I love her, so
Yeah, listen,
God
man.
willing.
I think the best thing that us as parents can do when it comes to middle school and high school transition is to not let go.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, depending on what era you were raised in, a lot of our parents had a tendency to um, make sure that you did your whatever academics from middle school to high school, right? But they never let go. They never gave you that level of independence, right? Today and age, if you kind of look at it, a lot of parents tend to give a level of independence, but you shouldn't. This should be the time that you grasp on a little bit tighter, because this is that firm, fine line that a student can do a lot of right or a lot of wrong.
Hmm.
I'm not telling you to be a helicopter parent, but at the same time, you have to be the parent. You have to take that charge and make sure that you are looking out for their best interest, because they're still a child. Like once high school is done and whatever, and depending on the dynamics of the household, if you feel 18 is good enough, all right, cool. If you feel 21 is good enough, all right. But that 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years, those are pivotal, man. Like
Hmm.
if I think if a lot of times, and I've seen it with a lot of parents, they how do I put it? It's more friend than parent.
Hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Um, and being a friend is cool, but sometimes that friendship doesn't allow you to see the parent side. So therefore, like you have to take that parental control and make sure that the kid is doing right.
Hmm.
Because if not, then you might have a hiccup in your hand that you may not know what to do. You know,
Hmm.
we have a lot of parents that come to us and they literally say, "I don't know what to do with my child." But I don't know how the upbringing was with the child, but you can definitely tell that there's a difference in dynamic. It's not the overprotective parent. It's not the, like they all want what's best for the child. But I think that's that missing link of like, this is the line that you don't cross,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
And parenting is always a balancing act because you never know which
Correct.
way. Sometimes you give too hard, sometimes you don't give enough, and you never know until it's too late. Sometimes. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you, man. But I mean, I love my daughter. We have great. But I'm the same way. I'm like, yeah, I'm still your parent. I'm still your dad.
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
still don't
yeah.
make rules. So
Exactly.
uh,
Having that super love always great. The
mhm,
kids need the love. The kids need that consistent love and affection, but
mhm,
also at the same time, like we gotta hold them accountable.
yep.
They still have academics to do. Teachers still have a role to play. Teachers are still trying to be, their motivators, their cheerleaders. But it's that partnership between school and home that makes that child elevate. They always say that it takes a village. But we
Yep.
got to build the village.
Yep. Yeah, and we got to work together too. So one of just kind of go back a little bit. One of the
But
things you did mention was the importance of creating a relationship with the students. And
yes,
in your pre-interview stuff that you wrote up for me, you mentioned a teacher, Mr. Severs, and an assistant
yes,
principal, Dr. Gregory Hodge,
correct.
and the positive impact that they had on you in that relationship with her. Were they kind of like a guiding light to you on how teachers and educators relationship with students should be?
I think so. Yeah, man. Like Dr. Hodge was my high school assistant principal, and Mr. Severs was my middle school English teacher. And I remember him vividly because he was one of the first teachers that looked like me.
Hmm.
You know, um, and I love the fact of he had a particular knack of how to talk to people, but also he commanded a level of respect, but also was very humble and appreciative. But what I loved about him was the fact that he, in that middle school, he had my brother and he had some of my sisters. So therefore, like he looked out because he saw the lineage.
Hmm.
But his way of teaching engaged me to the point that I just kept going. But he never allowed for for any uninterrupted time. Like he said, these 45 minutes are dedicated to us to learn, to engage in the work and just to do what we need to do. But
Yep.
he always kept us accountable in every shape or form.
Hmm.
Dr. Hodge was a different animal of educator. You know, um, so if you can envision the human version of Dr. Mario, the human version of the Mario Brothers, right?
Hmm.
But he was such a great educator in the sense of he looked forward to building capacity in every single student. He was the one that walked around and knew every student by name.
Hmm.
But he was one that he walks in the room and he commanded respect. You know, he also taught my brother. He taught some of my sisters, but he was also my English teacher at a um, program that I was at in Fordham University. Where it was an enrichment program called the Fordham Upward Bound program, and there he gave us a love for analyzing and being critical thinkers. And I think that's what I appreciated a lot because that gave me a lot of skills that till this day I still use. You know, um, he always was one of those. All right, you got me to point A, give me a little bit more. You know, he always wanted you to look at certain things in multiple perspectives. But I think that's what I grasped from him, and that's what I appreciate so much. It got up to a point where we disconnected for a while, and prior to his passing, I was teaching, and one of the assistant principals walks in the door, and he walks in with him, and I'm like, Dr. Hodge, what are you doing here? And it was just great to the fact that he saw, from the little child that I was to being an educator, and he was able to sit in my classroom and actually see me do my magic.
Nice.
So like it just came around full circle.
That's awesome, man. It's nice when you can to show someone who made a positive influence on you and then catch them later. And like, I made it. I'm here. Thank
Yeah,
you.
man.
So that's awesome. I'm
Yeah,
sure that was
you,
a very important day for you. So.
well, absolutely, man. And but then also, he was one that educated me a lot in New York City public education pension.
Hmm.
Like when you become a teacher, um, there's a lot to say about like saving up for retirement and saving up for your pensions, but no one really educates you on it. So he was able to kind of guide myself and my wife in reference to how do you navigate these waters so that way at the end of your retirement you are shining bright, so that way you walk around with having all those funds,
Hmm.
but that's one of the things that he kind of gave an analogy on, because a lot of he gave an analogy to the way how he was brought up in comparison to me. So he is a Jewish man, that worked in the Bronx for majority of his life. But he also said that in the Jewish heritage, what happens is that they, when a child goes for the bat mitzvah, um, or mitzvah, they tend to educate them on financials. In our communities, they don't. A
Hmm.
lot of our parents, if you remember, they live in check to check. So he was able to he kind of gave me that knowledge, that inside scoop of like, make sure that whoever else you speak to, give them this knowledge, because you want everyone to be as financially well, so that way they can make their own decisions. But they need to have the information, you know, um, which is something that I really enjoy, because now in age, there's a lot more talk about financial literacy and
Hmm.
financial education, and getting students to understand all those intricate points about how to manage money and how money works in America. You
Hmm.
know, but yeah, but it's that was one of the interesting parts that kind of got me. It was like, you know, make sure you fix whatever you can here, so that way you can see the fruits of your labor later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's financial literacy is a big one in our community that we struggle with as a whole. Hopefully, as we start building ourselves up, we're preparing the next generation a little better than we did, and slowly get ourselves out of that hole. So,
Yeah, man, that's true. I mean, listen, we always have to figure out what is it that we need versus what is it that we want. You
hmm.
know, and that's something that I speak when I was in the classroom. I spoke to a lot of my kids about that. Is the fact that you want sneakers. I mean, or that you need sneakers, but you want Jordans.
Hmm.
But you have to compare that. Like, you want $200-300 worth of Jordans, but yet did you realize what did mom and dad need to do to get those Jordans,
Yeah.
or what bill didn't they pay so you can get those Jordans?
Hmm.
That's a conversation I think they never know, and then once they hear that, they're like, "Damn, Mister, you're right." You
Hmm.
know, like, did you miss something in the fridge so that way you can get those pair of Jordans?
Yep. Did your parents work for 3 days to get you those shoes?
Exactly.
Did your parents
Whatever
just suffer?
overtime.
Yeah.
You know,
3 days.
and,
Yeah.
and, and yeah, they bust their butt to do whatever it is that they can just to make you happy. But yet, did you see the sacrifice, or do
Hmm.
you just see the reward?
Yep. I mean, and it doesn't get any easier when you have money, because then they get a little less worried about it because they don't
Hmm.
see the struggle. They don't.
Exactly.
So then you get the other end of the spectrum where they want everything, but they don't even have any frame of reference to know if there was a struggle or anything like that. So
Hmm.
so
You got
yeah,
that one
dude. Like I said, parenting, it's a balancing act. Always a balancing act. So
right.
moving on. When you ended up going to college in Stony Brook, and that didn't necessarily turned out well initially for you.
No, no, it didn't. Actually, before going to Stony Brook, I went to CW Post.
Okay.
Right. So I went to CW Post for a year, but I guess let me just backtrack there.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
my senior year of college, I mean senior year of high school. Still remember my guidance counselor kind of giving my options. I think during the time of high school, I didn't know how to properly study. You know, so I knew about college because I visited my sister in college, I visited my brother in college, but you know, I didn't really know what it took to get to college. All I know was, you take your classes, you take your SAT, hopefully they get you. I still remember taking the SAT twice and getting the same score twice.
Hmm.
I got a 720.
Hmm.
720, if you think about it, 700, 800 is what you would get in the math or the writing. That was
Hmm.
my combined score for both parts. So I don't know if it was the fact that I wasn't taught how to take the SAT, or maybe I didn't, maybe my mind wasn't wrapped around looking at it a particular way. But when I graduated, I had two options. I can actually three. I can either go to Concordia College, I can either go to Sullivan County Community College, which is in New York, about 4 hours up, or I can go to LIU CW Post. You know, LIU CW Post seemed like a better option. It was something that I was able to get out and explore. But things happened, and I wound up transferring over to Stony Brook. Now,
Hmm.
to answer your question, Stony Brook was, uh, I say in the beginning it was a gift and a curse, but then it became a gift. It was a gift because I was able to get into Stony Brook. I actually didn't get in the first time, but then I transferred. And still remember my first semester, trying to figure out what I wanted to study. Um, First semester, I think I got like a 2.5. It's like, okay, no problem. Next semester, they told us that our dorm is closing, so we need to move into suites. We all know what happens in suites.
Mm-hmm.
You got one or two options. You either have a really, really simple, sweet life, or you have sweet mates that want to party and rock out.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was the latter. You know, so it was literally my suite had activity from Wednesday to Sunday.
Mm.
You know, and it wasn't even our fraternity brothers, just random people that they put me in the suite. So that semester I messed up. Not strongly, but I did mess up.
Mm.
The following in that was my junior year. At that point, I think I was going into computer science. I was thinking about it because I was one of those I can't do math and I can't do science, right? But I started testing the waters. First, I started with the medical field. I knew I wasn't going anywhere when I got a D plus in chemistry. I just wasn't going anywhere. Luckily for calculus, I was able to pass the first year because my TA at the time, she helped me out greatly. Uh, Come to find out that junior year, I rack up with credits, and then I make the bold decision to pledge a fraternity. Right? It's after the add drop period, so I can't drop a class. So that semester was by far, of course, one of the most difficult ones because you're engaging in social emotional things, mental work. You're still doing academics. I'm working. I'm still traveling back and forth to home, and then I get into academic probation. Right. Um, and this is part where I'll get into it about the concept of building relationships. You know, I've always been one to build relationships wherever I go. So that following semester, I finish up. My average goes up, but it's not enough to get me past the academic probation. So Stony Brook says, unfortunately, you are no longer a student at Stony Brook. It's like, damn. Okay. We all know as college students that the letters don't go home. So there's nothing addressed to mom and dad. So that summer, I stay around Stony Brook, and I'm working at as like a head counselor for like a summer camp. But in the midst of that, I'm appealing to try to go back. But I also have, which I didn't realize, there was a couple of my friends that vouched for me with the dean of students to try to convince me to come back to Stony Brook. You know, um, they definitely explained to the dean of students that what you see on paper wasn't it's not me. It was a result of certain things, but that's not my normal behavior. So one thing led to another. I had an appointment with the dean of students, and she gave me a second chance. She's like, the reason why I'm giving you a second chance because you had a whole bunch of people come and vouch for you to come in. So I'm gonna give you one more shot. And from that point, I never looked back. So that's where the gift started to come. So from that moment on, my grades started elevating. Graduated Stony Brook, and then the following semester after graduating Stony Brook, I went into the human resource program. Wanted to get my master's in human resource management, but I wasn't officially in the program. I needed to do everything um, in a non-admission way. So I needed to take classes just to prove my worth, and then once I
Mm-hmm.
got the average, then they admitted me into the program. Um, so I went from having a 2.3 in my undergrad to graduating with a 3.2.
Nice.
So I was like, you know what, I'll take it. But my problem, which was the common practice of a lot of people that don't have a lot of guidance, is that I never got an internship.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize the beauty of an internship where you get to be in the field and understand how it works, and therefore get yourself one level ahead of the curve. Being in human resources, for many people that are listening that know the human resource world, it is a field that has a very low turnover rate. So for me, I had a double-edged sword. I was overqualified because I had a master's, but underqualified because I didn't have experience. So my first job coming out of Stony Brook with my master's was I was a part of the management trainee program at Geico.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore I'm learning the insurance game. I become licensed in um, auto, home, and they're trying to build me in capacity to become one of the managers inside of Geico. You know, But in the midst of it, and this is where, building relationships works out great. One of my cousins is a admissions counselor for a 2-year college.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, listen, I know that you've been looking for HR work. Would you consider being an adjunct? That way you can make some extra money and still practice your craft. I gave it a shot. I was like, all right, cool. One thing led to another. I started and I loved it. I was what, 24, 25, being an adjunct professor. My first, like extra job, but that was the taste of my educational career. Being an adjunct professor teaching human resource classes and business 101 and entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, the school closed its doors, but then in 2009, 2010, I decided to make the transition. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for education. Um, and just the world of building relationships, one thing led to another. And I was able to get someone that gave me the opportunity to start teaching history at a charter school.
Nice.
So um, worked in the charter school for 3 years. I got married to the love of my life in 2013, and then in 2013, this is where the hits you. 2013, I get married. Just got a brand new job working at the New York City Department of Education, being a founding teacher of a school,
Mm-hmm.
and I wound up in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I got what they call a bilateral pulmonary embolism.
Oh, no.
Right. So for those of you that don't know, that's when you get blood clots in both sides of your lungs. So there, I just finished getting married. We went to our honeymoon, and when we come back, I'm feeling a little bit off, and at that point, like I was working out, so typically when, at that time I was able to run 3-4 miles with no problem. I couldn't get through a quarter mile without huffing and puffing, grabbing bags. It would take me about 4 minutes just to get up a flight of stairs, only because I'm huffing and puffing. But I didn't know what it was. I thought it was extreme asthma, but then that's when they picked it up. But my first week of working at a brand new school and being married and doing everything, I was in the hospital.
That must have been scary.
Oh, dude, it was scary because I didn't really know what was happening, until the doctor actually sat me down and was like, listen, you could have died, like luckily, you were in a proper place and you came right away, but it could have stopped in your head. You could have caught a stroke. You could have stopped in your heart. You could have had a heart attack, And what's funny enough is that I didn't know that I was the one that broke the knot. I mean, that broke the actual clot for it to travel. So the clot was actually in my leg. And at that time, I thought I just had a knot in my calf. So I worked it out, but I was actually working out the clot. And once it broke up, then that's when it started.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, but thank the Lord, I'm good. It's been about 10 years now, and the only thing I'm on is just baby aspirin.
Yeah, good. That's good. That's good to hear. But I mean, as someone who's gone through his own level of health stuff, it changes your your momentum, and it changes your path and your vision. What impacts did that have on how you treated your career moving forward?
I think it didn't. I mean, I think it definitely ma- didn't change the trajectory, but it made me second guess and think certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now, like, it made me think about longevity. Like I was there in the moment, but I need to build a career. Being with my son and my wife, can't just think about the moment. I got to think about what is my life looking like in 10, 15, 20 years. So I think it made me dig deep into my craft and try to be the best teacher that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment it's been all about like getting to know my kids, getting to understand who are the students that are sitting in my classroom, what dynamics they come from. It's a lot of stories that are shared, man. A lot of people don't realize that teachers are a child's second parent from morning to afternoon. You know, really depending on the relationship that they have, but we definitely do become their parent. They come to us. They come to us for snacks. They come to us for guidance. They come to us for, if they have an ailment. Like a lot of these students, it's they only need one person to trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that trusting factor can be the difference of elevating a kid or just letting them just kind of fall and wither. But I always believe like every student needs that one person to trust, to walk the fine line with, to find that guidance, to just give them whatever social emotional support that they need in order to be that next generation of person, you know.
Hmm.
And that's part of like the mantra that I tell my teachers a lot. Like these students, like some of them are just looking for someone, like they may not have that one at home,
Yep.
so by you building that level of understanding and trust in the kid, the student might come more, our attendance might come higher, and things might be a little bit better for that child because they know that they're coming into a safe zone, safe and protected zone.
Yeah. Yeah,
If that
man.
makes sense.
No, it does. It does. I mean, it's you grow up and they tell you, you spend as an adult, you spend most of your time at work, and so your work
Hmm.
ends up becoming almost like your family. But for kids, they don't go to work; they go to school, and they're in school
Correct.
like 7, 8 hours a day, and the teacher is as much as their life as some of the parents are, and sometimes more. Especially
Hmm.
if you have parents that work double job, two jobs, and stuff like that. They might be able to. The teacher might be able to pick up things that are going on with the kid's life before the parents will, just because the consequences of life. That's what it is.
Correct.
So it is important. I think I mean, teachers don't get the respect they deserve sometimes when it comes to what they do. So it's always imperative. I think it's always wonderful when you talk to a teacher, and it's hard right now for teachers in general, but
Mhm.
almost every teacher you talk to, there is a drive that pushes them through all that stuff that
Oh
they
yeah,
do.
it's what I call like, what is your why? Like,
Hmm.
why do you wake up in the morning and fix your lesson plans and come to school? Why is it that you stand in front of your classroom and greet your kids? Why is it that you build relationship with that kid? Like
Hmm.
there's a reason why you walk into the door. Like you signed up for this, but there must be a reason why you signed up for this.
Hmm.
You know, you didn't just grab teaching because it was a easy job to have summers off. And by the way, just to demystify this whole thing about summers off, um, you know, um, yes, teachers do get summers off, but they earn it. Like they work a numerous amount of hours, and there's hours that people don't see.
Hmm.
Like teachers take their work and they take it home and they work nonstop, to try to get those grades in, to try to get those updates because they need to provide that feedback to the students. So therefore, like when you calculate those hours, it equals out to that time frame over the summer.
Hmm.
You know, um, but also at the same time, like I think people tend to realize that teachers, just like everyone else, need to regenerate their batteries. Like they need that time to get back into the zone, because it's good to go time, but there's only but so much go time you need before you need a break.
Hmm.
So like, that's why teachers tend to have those summers off. Of course, other institutions or jurisdictions of educational systems, they might have a different way of looking at summers. Like some teachers need to go back in August. New York City teachers come back in September. But I do think teachers definitely earn
Hmm.
it.
No, I mean, it, it's crazy how much teachers have to put up with, and how much stuff they deal with, and how much mental and emotional stresses they deal with at work, and then they come home and they're still grading papers till 10,
Oh,
10, 11 o'clock
absolutely.
at night, and then
Yeah,
come in
man.
the next day doing their
And doing it again.
yeah, and they got to come up with a plan. They're not planning while they're in school because they're busy doing school stuff all day, and then
Yeah.
like I have teachers at my daughter's school that are great, and they're staying after school with programs and teaching the kids extra stuff after school and helping them out with stuff. So yeah, I mean, like I said,
And yeah,
teachers go
and,
above
and
and
what's
beyond.
crazy enough is that teachers, and just like any administrator, anyone that works in the education system, people forget that we're human.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that is one of the key pieces. Like we are human and we also have emotion. Many times teachers are what I call the best actors in the world. Why? Because it's not that they're trained, but they need to build up that particular emotional wall to not take things personal. And do their job the best that they can, but then also, when they get home, like decompress and do whatever they need to do, you know. Um, so my hat's off to anyone that's in an educational aspect in any shape or form because it takes a lot, man.
Yeah, it is. It is. So speaking about teaching, eventually
Mm-hmm.
you go into. I mean, eventually you become assistant principal. Obviously, what is that transition like? how do you go from being a teacher and then being like, oh, I mean, I'm gonna become. I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but
No, no,
what is that
no,
transition?
no. It definitely wasn't overnight. While I was teaching, right? So just like you mentioned, I have over a decade in teaching, right? So I started off in a charter school, then I went over to the New York City Public School. Um, During that time, teaching or whatever, I get involved with multiple overtime opportunities. In New York City, we call it procession. So I get involved with a program called the YABC program, the Young Adult Borough Office.
Mhm.
Um, and the purpose of that program is technically kind of like a night school. So it allows a student that's over age and undercredited the opportunity to get credit accumulation faster, or also disengage from day school and only stay at the night. So that way we can concentrate on that person's efforts, right? So I started working in this program, and I work with one of my administrative mentors. His name is Martin Smallhorn, and he starts to show me the different, like this major shift of having students have a particular different way of thinking, right? He wants students to have a rich mindset and not a poor mindset.
Mhm.
And he's not talking about poor mindset when it comes to money, but poor in reference to the poor decisions that you might make. you know but that rich mindset is elevating yourself, putting yourself next to people that can elevate your thinking and elevate your game.
Mhm.
But a lot of these students, he reworks the program, but I start working with him, and I one summer, my wife and I actually work for him, and he allows me the opportunity to be kind of like a part of his administrative team, just helping with like managing the classrooms and stuff like that. But they convinced me to go and take administrative classes. I didn't want to, honestly. I didn't think about it. It wasn't something that was on my radar. So it was like, you know what? Why don't you take it? I was like, all right, fine. They finally convinced me. I took the classes, and I will tell you, it is a different perspective that I have now from when I started to when I finished the program, because now you see everything in both lenses. You see it in how it is and where it should be. You know, Being an administrator gives you, like anyone can be an administrator, but it's the lessons that are taught inside of it that make you really think about what's next for the students. So I wound up taking the classes, and I have these two certifications. One that's called school building leadership, that allows me to be an assistant principal or a principal, and then school district leadership, which allows me to work outside of the building. So if I wanted to work for the superintendent's office or something within the district, I can actually do that. So my last year of teaching, I'm there minding my own business, and then that couple months, I decided to transition to go to another school. Not because the school was doing anything wrong, but I've been here for so long, I felt like I needed a change. So um, I get picked up by a different school, and I start arranging my curriculum. I'm a social studies teacher by trade, so I'm preparing for U.S. history. One thing leads to another, and one of the members, or one of my colleagues from the district leadership classes, calls me, and it's like, "Hey, what's up? Do you remember me?" I was like, "Yay, what's up? Hey, hi." So she happens to be one of the principals of a school, but she was taking the classes with us because she wanted the other certification. So one thing leads to another, and she's like, "Are you still looking?" And I was like, "Yeah." So one thing leads to another. We meet up at a coffee shop. We start talking about school and administrative work and stuff, and she had an opening.
Mhm.
So one thing led to another. I put my name in the hat, and I got the job.
Nice, nice.
So thank you. So it just worked out, man. And I think that transition from being a teacher to an assistant principal, it is great, but it's scary.
Hmm.
Now it's great because the fact of you're filling out that whole trajectory, right? You start from the beginning and you keep going, so you can see how it goes, and you can see the impact that you have on these students, right? So I'm going from having a classroom of 34 students to now helping to operate a school that has close to 400 kids,
Hmm.
you know, of different modalities, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. But it's also scary because you don't want to mess up.
Yeah.
you know, and also you want to make sure that the kids are protected, but you also want to make sure that you don't make the news,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and assistant principal's journey is you are what I call the chaos coordinator, if that makes sense, right? There's a lot of chaos that happens, right? Assistant principals are putting out little fires everywhere, you know. My job being I'm an assistant principal of supervision, so I work closely with the dean. I work closely with the different departments to make sure that pedagogical practices are still happening. But it's putting out the little fires, because you don't want the big fire to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure the students are accountable, making sure teachers are keeping the kids accountable, and that learning is still happening. Making sure that we look at discipline when it comes to our students that are getting in trouble in a more restorative lens and not a consequential lens. You know, um, but also trying to give all the supports that the students need. And it's scary because like for me, I've been so many years as a teacher. Sometimes I still think as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to let that go. But there are times where like you don't have a choice. You have to think like a teacher.
Yeah.
But it's the other scary part is where I needed to reflect and think about this. I'm in a marathon and not a race. If you understand what I mean, right? Working in a marathon and not a race. Like we need to build this step by step. I can't throw every single new initiative all in 1 year because
Yeah.
then something's going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have small little initiatives that you try to build up and you make it going, then you go to the next one, then eventually, it's gonna grow legs and it's gonna grow into the fruition that you want. But
Mm-hmm.
Mel Gibson said it best in the movie The Patriot: "Aim small, miss small."
Mm-hmm.
So you know I was fortunate that my principal gave me the opportunity, and therefore, I've been able to do a lot of changes, and the students see the changes.
Yeah.
I got a lot of students that mentioned like, Mister, like, since you got in here, like the school has gotten better because of a lot of your ideas. Like we're doing it. Like it feels like I can come here and there's activities going on. And it's not to say that they weren't doing things, but I guess I had a different perspective because I came from the outside world.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. I mean, it's one of the things I was going to ask is, because you guys as an administrator, you're doing a tightrope act between the teachers, the students, and
Yes.
the school board, that stuff like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
a difficult thing to think. So what are other kind of challenges that you deal with, as an assistant principal when it comes to that balancing act that you have to do?
I think the difficult component comes with, of course, I think it's three parts. Part one is making sure that that yourself and the teachers are aligned. You know, um, a lot of times you might throw some initiatives, but I'm one that believes that I wouldn't give you an initiative to do if I wouldn't do it myself. You know, um, like one thing is to throw something at you, but if you see me doing it, then you know it's possible. Or providing the resources that are necessary. Um, One of the challenges I think for me the first year with teachers was letting them understand that I'm on their side. I don't believe in the "I got you" approach. You know, I want to build you to the best version of yourself, but I need to do it in time. But I also need you to take a self look at where you're doing good and what are your deficiencies. I can look at it when it comes to observations and feedback, but you also need to take a second to figure out not only where do you need work in, but what's the relationship you have with your kids. You know, um, and I think that's where the second part is. It's that the difficult tightrope between teacher and student interaction, right? So as an administrator, you tend to be sometimes a mediator, but of course you have to put the administrative lens on. But sometimes there are some friction between teacher and student because it just happens. But I do think teachers, how do I put it? Sometimes teachers need to take a back seat to see what the student needs. You know, um, Part of the friction that I see, which causes a little bit of like back and forth play, is some teachers setting up systems and routines in order to ensure success in their classroom, right? So, like, a boss telling you, like, these are the rules, right? A boss needs to tell you the rules from the beginning so that way you know not to cross it. But you can't give the rules in December when you started in September, you know? Um, So that's where I think some of the tightrope problems tend to happen. But I
Mm.
also feel the tightrope problem when it comes to the outside perspective is making sure parents are on your side. One of the problems we're having today, and as a matter of fact, New York Times had a big article on it, was talking about chronic absenteeism. And just we have a lot of students that are not going to school.
Yeah.
You know, um, and it's something that has become noticeable across the states. And for whatever reasons, everyone says that it's due to the rippling effects from COVID, which is true. But then I think not only is it the rippling effects, but it's also we haven't been able to talk about it and get to a place where we're comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, um, a lot of students that I see, I have what they call chronic absenteeism and students that are chronically late. Like our school starts at 8:30. I got kids coming in at 9, 10 o'clock. You already missed like a quarter of the day. And some of them like there's that accountability measure is missing. You know, I think part of it is there's a lot of things happening at home. Some of the students are taking their younger siblings to school while mom and their guardians are going to work. Some of them parents think that they gotten up to go to school, but in actuality they're still sleeping. And some of them are doing things outside the school that we can't control. There's stuff in our sphere of influence that we can control and things we can't. But I also feel that some of the tightrope problems that comes in is understanding that traditional aspects of looking at how we see absenteeism in the way and the role of how parent engagement is has
Mm-hmm.
changed. So
Mm-hmm.
traditional thinking of how we want parents to engage with us has changed. A simple text for them is fine.
Yeah.
Phone calls they don't call or pick up. You know, emails they rather block. Depending on the parent.
Mm-hmm.
But like we have the different levels of parents. We have the over engaged. We have the don't bother me as much, or the ones that I'm gonna pop in whenever I need to. But I think that's the one thing that can round up everything if we get those parents engaged with us so they understand that not only is a nation problem, but your child can become better successful if they come to school. you know um, so those are those three challenges. Teachers with trying to find their balance with systems and structures, kids trying to figure out where they are, and the parents just trying to build that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. It's. I mean, my parenting different from what my parents were because obviously I have the luxury of time that my
Mhm.
parents never had, so
Yeah.
I can be more involved. I can talk about one of the greatest things now I think is just the way technology is being used, where you can have these apps at the school where the teacher, oh, kids are doing this in school now, or like the other day my daughter. Uh, I don't take offense to the troubles of saying kids that show up late. I'm always late dropping off my daughter up at school, but it's like 10, 5, 10 minutes late.
Right.
The car line is done. I'm dropping her up in the front of the school and say, hurry up, run, run, run. Because
Yeah.
our mornings are always a mess, um, but she's always there,
Right. But
but,
that's different. Like
yeah,
it's different because like 5-10 minutes is different than three
a
four
half a
hours.
day. Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
So I started like, oh shit, I'm on that list he's talking about, and it was like, oh yeah, they're coming in at 10. Okay, we're not that bad, but it's just funny. So, but the other day I did drop my daughter off. Her teacher sent me a message. She's like, Eva seemed a little off today. Like she forgot her glasses again.
Mhm.
She brought her Crocs instead of her sneakers, and they had gym, PE today. I don't want to offend PE teachers, but
Mhm.
yeah, you don't say gym is PE.
Right. Yeah.
I have
PE.
a buddy. I have a buddy who's a PE teacher, so he'll yell at me when he hears this. But so she forgot her schools and so whatever, and she seemed a little bit off today. So I was like, all right, thank you for letting me know. And when she came home, I talked to her. Like,
Right.
was everything okay? Was something going on today, or did you? She's like, I don't know. I think I'm tired. I'm like, okay, well, let's make sure we're done earlier tonight and you go to bed right on time, so we don't rush in the morning. So
Good.
yeah, but I mean, I know, but when COVID started and we moved up from Texas to Rhode Island, and she went
Mhm.
back to a school in Pawtucket that I grew up in, which is a much, lower socioeconomic school, and teacher wasn't as technologically advanced as some other teachers were, but
Mhm.
she's learning how to read, and we're in, I think, May.
Okay.
They go to end school here in June. In Texas, they're done by May, but it was like late April, early May, and I'm like, she's still struggling reading. We have to read the sentence like 3 times before she remembers what was on that sentence.
Gotcha.
Then it takes her 3 times. And the teacher's like, yeah, I know she's been struggling with that all year. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me anything in like November? Why didn't
Yeah,
you tell me? I mean, granted, it was a year of COVID. There was so much stuff going on, but I was just like, if I would have known in November, I could have worked extra harder for her.
exactly.
And so those little things really do make a difference sometimes for parents. So.
Oh yeah, man. Like getting parents the updates that they need is beneficial.
Hmm.
But I also feel that not only calling parents for the bad stuff, but definitely call for the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's great to receive a phone call that's like your child's not in trouble, just want to see how good they were doing.
Hmm.
That will elevate the game. Because like it's a different approach. That the parent will give to the child, and the child will come in the next day feeling a different type of way.
Yep. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling when you go to school, and I mean, I really love my daughter's school. I mean, it's a great school, and you come to the parent teacher conference, they give you the little report card, and you see the little section where they write a note. And I
Yeah.
remember growing up, it was always like talks too much in school, doesn't pay attention. It was just like, but it was
That was
like
me
they,
too, man. That was
yeah,
me. It's like he's great in class, but he just talks too much.
talk too much, he doesn't focus or whatever, but he still got an A, and it's like, and so now it's like he's got this like super paragraph of like she does this and then and she's great at this and she's always helpful and she does that, and I'm like, I really appreciate the fact that you went out of your way to write a legitimate paragraph to
Yeah.
tell me how she's doing, even though he does tell me stuff throughout the year. And he says, man, just like it just makes a big difference where the teacher cares enough to know your daughter, your kid, and what they're doing, what their struggles are, and really pays attention to what they were doing. And so it makes you feel good as a parent when you go there and you're like, fuck yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Listen, that little piece of details or stuff that also you may not be able to see, only
Mhm,
because like, you see your kids at a certain hour.
mhm,
Like you're not there for most of the academic development,
mhm.
so like it's great to get that feedback because now you know how to support it.
Yeah.
But it also helps with that social emotional learning because like the student feels seen, you know what I'm
Mhm,
saying? And when they feel seen and heard, they're able to learn a little better.
mhm. And it's helpful too because with the technology stuff, it's like I mean, with my daughter, the teacher sent me a message when she was like in first grade.
Mhm.
Please don't have Eva come with any more shirts that they had like the little glitter shirts that when you fold them one way, she's just
Oh.
spent all day playing with it. It was paying attention. I was like, all right, Eva, you can't wear that shirt to school no more. But it's the little things where it's like, okay, this is obviously a distraction, as
Yeah.
opposed to back in the day. And so, well, that's good, man. I'm glad to hear that. So, and for teachers who are looking to want to make that jump into something more administrative, what I mean, what's something they should be doing? Like, what should they be taking those classes? Should they be taking these extra overtime organizations or whatever? I mean,
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I think for someone that's looking to elevate their game and get to the next level, I definitely think they shouldn't do it straight off the cuff. Like if you're a first, second, third year teacher, be patient.
Hmm.
Like your time will come. Because there's a certain process of learning that you do as a teacher, right? So year one, you're building your lesson plans. You're getting to know who you are in the classroom. Year two, you're tweaking your lesson plans. Now you understand where you went right and wrong. By year three, four, five, like you kind of have that understanding. You already have a kind of like a rinse, wash, repeat cycle,
Hmm.
but then you tweak it. Um, when I think getting involved with certain aspects of instruction in your school will start that conversation, like getting involved with like the instructional leadership team, which is dealing with anything instruction, how to give new initiatives inside the school. Um, Going to professional developments, going to being a part of something called the school leadership team, where that's where you have a common conversation with the principal, parents, and a lot of invested parties of the school. Um, if someone is really looking to make that jump, I think that before they do it, they need to realize why they do it. You know, are you doing it for a paycheck? Are you doing it for because you actually want to make that difference? You know, because again, like you can get the license, but I think it's what you do with it that counts.
Hmm.
You know, like we signed up for education, but not everyone is meant to be an educator. You know,
Hmm.
like for me, like I'm blessed the fact that my change of career actually worked out great, and I became the educator that I am today. Um, but some people, education is just not in their wheelhouse. They went to it because it was a job, but I put it this way: you can hate your job but love your career. You need to be built for the long run of this career.
Mm-hmm.
But the administrative work, I would say, if that is what you want, talk to your principal about it. Uh, Make sure that you have someone that supports you in your growth. Make sure that you have a mentor that's going to guide you towards looking at the ins and outs of administrative work. If you do decide to take the classes, take it in a very reflective lens, um, but also network with those colleagues because those will be the upcoming assistant principals and principals around you. So therefore, you can build ideas with them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times, just like in regular college, we go to college, but a lot of the guys that we graduated with, we don't really keep in contact with. You know, when you get to the master's program, you tend to keep in contact with some of them. Depending on how intricate the program is, you tend to keep more contact. But administrative work, like you definitely need to keep in contact with them because you never know where your path may take
Mm-hmm.
you. I always feel like you should never burn a bridge. You
Yeah.
know, burning a bridge in education is it tends to be a really bad move.
Mm-hmm.
Only because like not only are you hurting the relationship with yourself and another administrator, but you're also like you could potentially hurt the relationship of students if they see that contention.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But yeah, but talking to the principal, taking those classes, getting that reflective mindset, and just like podcasts like this, just start listening to different podcasts and different uh, audiobooks and books about education. You have to look at where is it that you want to go. What is your focal point? Like for me, when I was an educator, right, I was doing social studies, but I was also a ESL teacher. So my framework and my frame of thinking is more towards immigrant children, people of dual languages. But there's some teachers that might be just a literacy teacher that wants to go into it. So depending on what your passion is, that will kind of guide you on where you want to go in it. But um, you know, once you decide, just go all in. If you go all in and you place yourself around people that are going to guide you and mentor you, then I think you're going to have some success.
Nice. Awesome. And then I guess one other question I have is, do you put the pal in principal?
um, I try to be. I definitely try to be a pal.
Yeah.
I'm definitely one that you know. When I think of pal, I don't think of it as just a buddy buddy, but I also think of like someone that people can look up to.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I've made it a point is, you know, whenever I go to work, I get dressed up to the nines.
Mm-hmm.
Suit, bow tie, shoes. Maybe I'll do the suit with the sneakers, but I definitely want them to see, someone that they can look up to, and someone that they can see that like I want to try to emulate this style of professionalism or this style of person. Everyone has their own professional look, but I guess that happens to be me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my pal and principal happens to be like, putting others first, making sure that whoever I can assist, I can, but making sure that students felt seen, felt heard, and the fact that the school community can build because of the actions that us as administrative staff are actually doing.
Mm-hmm. Nice, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That was gonna be the hard. That was gonna be my hard question for you well, but also, man, and so usually when we get to this point in the podcast, I like to ask, if you could go back and talk to a younger version of you and give yourself, a piece of advice. What's something you would tell yourself?
Oh, oh man. All right. So I think it depends on which version of myself, because there's been multiple versions. Is it the middle school version of getting like bullied and trying to figure it out, the high school one, the college one? I would go back to my college one, actually high school. Um, and the reason why I choose high school because just like I said, high schools would kind of build you up, but college actually defines you. I would could some of the words of wisdom I would tell my younger self is to, on top of whatever leadership programs I was in, like in high school, I was a part of the Aspira program, which is a leadership development program. I was a Boy Scout, I was a part of a whole bunch of things, but I would say get the resources you need to elevate yourself academically. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can, with some of the harder things like science and math, I can contextualize it now, but my brain wasn't like, it wasn't at that point at that time where, it was able to look at those concepts and try to figure it out. So I would say get the resources that I need so that way I can elevate my thinking, when it comes to math, science, ways on how to write better, ways on how to speak better. Um, and also I would tell them to, you know, be patient. A lot of times, things come, but you can't rush it. As much as we want to rush things, sometimes rushing something doesn't work in the best of our interest. You know, um, so take your time, never settle, but have a go get 'em attitude, but do it in a patient mindset. You
Hmm.
know, definitely put your ducks in a row before you make a move.
Nice.
And I say that because I can say I've been blessed with having not only working hard and do whatever I need to do, but having people along my journey that have been instrumental in just like, giving me a nudge or giving me an edge or giving me an opportunity to shine. Like, granted, I may be a Leo when it comes to zodiac sign, so always the center of attention, but you know, I'm always a pretty humble guy, so
Hmm.
like I'm appreciative of all the opportunities given to me, and never taking it for granted. But I also think my younger self needs to understand that there are going to be times that you're going to struggle. There are times that you're going to grow, but try to stay the course.
Hmm. Yeah, it's that's I mean, it's hard when you're younger, not realizing what's coming forward, and you
Oh
go
no,
back now, and it's like, at the end of the day, you're just like, man, cut yourself some slack.
yeah,
It'll come,
that's
we don't
true.
realize how important, sometimes, like you said, having that one person give you some nudge, and you like listen to that person, like don't make it so hard. Listen to that person, like go ahead. And I'm sure you deal that with a lot of your kids too, where you're like,
Yeah,
listen to,
yeah. So a lot of my kids are, act now, speak later.
yeah,
You
of
know,
course.
um, but yeah, like that particular segment of like listening to what someone has to say. I think they tend to listen as a last resort, not because it went the right way that they wanted to.
Yeah. Hmm.
But they also realize at the end that there's always another way. There's always a third way to do something.
Hmm.
You know, and it's interesting. Like it's a common lesson that I've come to learn, and also because last 7 8 years I've been doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So
Hmm.
one of the things that they mention is that you either win or you learn.
Yeah.
You never lose. You just happen to learn a valuable lesson, so that way you could try to win in the next one.
Hmm.
So I think it's going through those motions and getting that, I guess, pep talk, so that way you can elevate your game. Um, Definitely works great when you sit there and have that reflective lens.
Yeah. Learning from failures is what's it called, a trait from wisdom and time sometimes, that
So yeah,
our
but
kids
is it
are,
failure though?
no, but I'm saying, but learning from fail, like every time you fail is an opportunity to learn and get
Right,
better
right,
and
right.
improve, something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I always go back to Batman quote, like, why do we fall? So we learn to lift ourselves
Yeah,
back
yeah,
up. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big part of what I do with my daughter and how I raise her, where I don't talk about how easy things are. I don't, I don't go about and say, so like the things I try to teach her is, everything's a learn. You're slowly learning. Just because you don't get it now doesn't mean you won't get it tomorrow.
right.
Until everything's one at a time. And if you mess up, what I mean, it's not about the fact that you messed up, and you should be just about that you messed up. It's about that, what can I learn so I don't mess up again? You know what I mean? So that she doesn't grow up with the fear of failure that causes us to stop ourselves from moving forward. You know what I mean? Because that's
Exactly.
what I dealt with my whole life. Every time
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
afraid of failure, I hit a roadblock and I just wanted to stop. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like,
man. And that's I think what today's society call it productive struggle. You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
It's like you're trying to get to a goal, but you are gonna reach those obstacles.
mhm,
Um, but it's also like how you practice to make it better.
mhm,
They say practice makes perfect, but what if whatever you're practicing isn't perfect? You know,
mhm,
perfect practice makes perfect. You
mhm, yeah,
because like when you understand how to properly do something, then you can do it on repeat, and you know that you got it. So that continuous motion becomes muscle memory.
oh yeah, Yep. That's what I love. What I try to teach my daughter as well. So I'm like, oh yeah, I think
Keep doing it, man.
as a millennial parents, and we're a little more inept in trying to understand the impact as opposed to just being a parent. Like our parents were just parents. You do
Right.
this or else, you know,
Yeah.
and thankfully for some of us it helped out our path, and I think we're a little more retrospective in
Oh,
looking at things and
absolutely.
saying, okay, what else can I do to impact it that are slightly different and which better ways of doing it as
Yeah.
opposed to just doing it the way I know. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
but we also have that perspective that like we do have our parents, but now we became the elders. You know
mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? And it's like this the youth has the energy, but we have the wisdom. I was like,
Yeah.
Common mentioned that. You know, that we definitely have the wisdom to keep them on the right path, but they have the energy to keep it going. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how do you combine those two so that way they can get a proper trajectory of wherever they want to go?
For sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely, man. And then I guess my last question for you is, how do you say success in Spanglish?
Damn, good one. Um, I'm gonna say, cógelo con take it easy. You know what I'm saying? Like you signed up for this, but cógelo con take it easy. Like it's you're here for the journey. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Your journey is different than everyone else's. Your chapter of development is different from everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
So please make sure that you stay the course. It is a marathon and not a race. That's why I say cógelo con take it easy.
Awesome. Definitely. Yeah. It's a hard thing it's hard to see, what's that? It's hard to see the trees for the forest or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
it's like,
Forest
sometimes
for the trees.
the forest for the trees, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, whatever. You're something you're so caught up. And I mean, I've been there. We've all been there where we're like, oh, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And then eventually you get there and then you're like, I'm still not there yet. Why
Yeah,
does it
yeah,
not feel like I'm there yet? I was like, because it's a marathon. You're still getting there. So,
yeah, man.
but thank you, Edwin. I really appreciate you taking the time to get on the show, and
Absolutely,
it's
man.
been a great conversation. I really enjoy.
I loved it, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's great, man. It was great to connect with you one more time. It was like it was connect to just get on this platform. And I look forward to kind of seeing all the other how to say success in Spanish stories.
yeah, exactly, brother. I appreciate it, man. And you have a good one, dude. So,
And you, my brother.
all right, and obviously for everyone else, thank you once again for joining and listening in. And I hope you'll continue to join me next time as we continue to learn how to say success in Spanglish.